I love rogue decks. These decks that might not be the highest usage, but still can impact the game quite heavily. These decks can range from anything from cards people have never read before to things people just everyone gets hyped over and then just overlooks once the set's released. These decks, to me, make the game really fun, and they provide so many opportunities to be creative and just win in style. So as I've got a lot of experience with rogue decks. For example, the plant deck that I helped innovate for European Championships. That's a deck that was rogue. No one knew what the card. No one really knew what the cards did at the venue, or it just in general. And then we got it to like the very top level of competitive play. I've done well at multiple events with a lot of rogue decks, and I'd like to think I have some experience in helping to innovate and make decks reach their like true potential, and then go from there. So I was thinking about how I can portray this, and I wanted to give my best tips for making rogue decks competitive, and maybe even do a little series on trying to get like taking some rogue decks and trying to get them to be as competitive as possible. So, an example of a deck that I've got today, which I'm going to show a list of, is Vaylantz. Vaylantz is something I've not really seen ever achieve anything, but all the cards everything is an extender. The cards in general are just really cool. They have cool mechanics. They all summon from the pendulum zones. Even though a lot of people don't like pendulums, they don't play like pendulums because they're all like the one card starters. They all summon from like the pendulum zone. Sorry, the scale. They don't like necessarily rely on a pendulum summon. They're all one scale, so in Eng they can't pendulum summon. They all search, and I think decks like this and these untapped decks provide so much fun to the game, and yeah. So I've actually recorded a 40-minute or 40 to 50-minute kind of step by step how I built this deck, or like a build it with me kind of thing, where I went from this deck from nothing to my first like draft list, and then we go from there and adapt that in the future. So yeah, what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna go over this like the list that I've already made. I'll upload that video at a later date, probably in a few days. We can go through this list and go step by step on just general tips for building rogue decks and how to make your rogue deck as competitive as possible, just to do your best at events. Okay, so here we have the Vaylantz list that I was on about before. It's a little bit of an interesting list, but I don't think I wasn't using like a standard base in order to make this list. I was purely going off of my own knowledge, like reading the cards, messing around with it a little bit, going off my own knowledge, and not using any YouTube kind of videos as a base. This is just my own theory, and obviously over time I will adapt this. I looked at other lists for base, but I didn't go off any of the lists to design this. This is just what I wanted to play. So, as a side note, very quickly, I do think that like there's a lot of these decks with potential. Another one might be. I think Symphonic Warriors has some really cool cards. For example, DJ. It's an extender that it's an extender that then summons from deck and then gets free synchro plays, and then the what card summons from deck is then a not once per turn extender by banishing from grave. Like the deck has decks like these, even though they happen to go with the pendulum, have a lot of like potential. Example would be Jesse Cotton and Vlad with ninjas. There's these decks that have just like so much potential and could just like be fun. And I think I'm debating doing a series on just taking some of these decks as suggested by you guys, and then seeing where we can take them, and maybe even taking them to some events. Anyway, so I'll go with Vaylantz, with like the theory for this deck. So with this deck, we've got. So this is actually blind second. This isn't a blind first deck. So we're not actually going for a big board. If you make blind first, you can make boards like this. If I can edit properly, I will insert a picture of the board you can make with the blind first list. But not good at editing yet. So, so this list, supply and second, we've got our engine here. We've got, so Vaylantz is pretty reliant on one monster. There are a couple of decks like this. For example, if we just take plants as an example, it's pretty reliant on Sunseed Genius Loci. So we have lots of ways to access our one of. So this is our best monster. This is a double search. This is the heart and soul of the deck. So we're playing Prosperity, we're playing Small World, and we're playing the in-engine scale from deck to get this card. As well as obviously Beyond the Pendulum, but that isn't really a searcher for this. I'll explain a bit more why as we get into it. So I'm not going to focus on like the Vaylantz cards themselves. I'm more going to focus on the building and like the theory behind the rogue deck, and how I'm trying to make it competitive with this list. So what does Vaylantz have that other decks don't have? So this Vaylantz list, for example, it has extenders. Everything's an extender. So it's like, for example, Kashtira, some one monster at a time generally. For example, summon Fenrir, activate effect. Like, the summons are limited. Every monster in your hand in this deck is an extender that can push through. However, going first, none of these, aside from Dominator Duke, if you can get to the fusion, none of these are actually like hard interrupts. But they're really good at generating free advantage. And unfortunately, there aren't that many generic things in the extra deck that can put up negates, especially in this format where having a spell trap negate would be so valuable. This deck really struggles to put it up. The only way to do that is by playing multiple bricks and then relying on Cyberstein to summon Exterior, which I admit I got inside, but I couldn't justify making that. Instead, I read this fusion, for example. This fusion, you could argue to play two of. It's insane. So you tribute level 5 or higher that's underneath the EMZ, summon it, and target a monster in their spell trap zone. You have cards that put your opponent's monsters in the spell trap zone. Bounce it to their hand, burn them. That can include, for example, your lava, and again, then it gains attack equal to once the damage taken. For example, you could bounce your lava golem, burn, becomes 5/5 attack, literally just attack the game. Like, that kind of thing is just insane. And the deck doesn't use its normal summon, so you can freely use these cards. The deck also searches and uses effects without having a monster, so Gamma's really effective, both going first and second. Sprite Red looks a bit weird, I admit, but especially since Vaylantz do lock you. However, it's fine because it's mainly there as one, a small world bridge, and two, because you don't use a normal summon, you can normal summon it. So the reasoning behind this is we've got our engine stuff. Again, these get like their kind of unknown bonus because people don't know what these cards do. So they'll have this thing of interacting incorrectly, or you can pretty much assume that your opponent isn't going to optimally interact with you. So these cards will be gaining extra advantage as well. So I've taken the engine. Then for Vaylantz, they have these field spells, which are a really unique part of the deck, replacing your opponent's field spell and putting their cards in spell trap zone. Again, we're trying to optimize like usage of this by blinding second, although post side we can easily go first. We're trying to optimize like by playing 2/1 in case there's a pop, small wall for consistency, and just searching lava golem. Technically, you could search third if there was a level link, but I don't believe there's a level link here. Although post side, which is a curry, there is a level link. But that's beside the point. So yeah, this list is built with our engine, and then we've added some consistency cards to get to engine. With some decks, for example, you don't need as much consistency cards because, like, for example, even though it's not rogue, Kashtira, you have Fenrir, you have Superhero Samurai is no example. You have Kashtira, you have Fenrir, Unicorn, Field Spell. You have a lot, like, even Theosis. Technically, you've got a lot of cards to get to your main engine. Some rogue decks like this don't have that advantage, unfortunately, so we have to rely a little bit more on these searcher cards, like Prosperity and Small, to get to the, like, and in-engine stuff, to get to our one really broken card. Because everything else, admittedly, is more an average card, this thing is just insane. So anyway, we're focusing on our engine, and then we're playing pile of blind second cards. So the reason I'm playing blind second is because I didn't feel the board was strong enough to be able to justify. The problem is the board is pretty strong, especially post side. It's really strong, but game one, yeah, you gain too much advantage. It's better to push going second, as I explained before. And for that reason, playing things that are good into the format. So these cards can change any time. Exact same theory with Plant. We played all blind second cards. We didn't play any like hand traps in that because we didn't need to. With the original list. With the London list, we played some hand traps because it was more appropriate for the format. For example, Droll, limiting the boards. Droll would be very valuable in here as well because it's really good at supporting a board post side regardless. And then side deck, it's the same kind of theory. We don't use our normal summon. We're looking for cards that will blow out, or cards that other decks can't necessarily play as effectively. For example, Vanity Fiend is an amazing one because we play 3 Small Water Searcher, 3 Prosperity, 3 Vanity Fiend. That's 9 copies of Vanity. Sorry, if Prosperity could hit it, that's potentially 9 copies of Vanity Fiend, but Prosperity can also hit Small World, so Prosperity has to hit 1 of 6 cards to get this. You never use your normal summon. And not many decks can really play this now, and no one's playing around it. Slumber has really good synergy with this, especially since you can put the whatever you give them, like Jizukuru for example, into their spell and trap zone. So we're looking for just these synergies and these little like niche things that other decks don't have. For example, Plant had Concon, and Plant had these interactions that no one knew with like Princess treating as a hand trap from hand. People don't know, for example, when these summon from Pendulum Zone, that you can just move them and then do it again. So when if Kashtira, a lot of Kashtira players will get lazy. They'll block 1 Pendulum Zone, and then they'll go into something else. Like they won't do their full combo. They'll just lock 1 Pendulum Zone. Like, oh, they can't Pendulum Summon. Activate summon. Move them, and it's fine because you don't need to. This isn't like a real Pendulum deck. Also playing the tributes also are for the Shangri-La. And then extra deck, again, it's designed to blind second and kill. Shadow Mosquito, the OTK card for Sprite for a long time. Beyond, make all their guys 0 attack. Willow, get a trap spell from their grave and use it. Zeus, Boral Sword, this card, which is just insane again. We're taking what the deck has and trying to maximize the advantage of that. So again, Plant, maximize the fact that Lokai is a 1 card full combo. Vaylantz, maximize that this 1 card or this 1 card can just completely blow out an opponent on its own. Quite literally, if you can get, even if you tribute summoning for a level 5 or higher, not tribute summoning, sorry, obviously, but like if you special summon one of these from scale and get it moved, for example with this effect, or anything, move it to underneath extra monster zone, Lava Goal on them, summon this, that is game on its own. So few decks can just kill like that, incorporating burn damage. And then you've got these things of time all around, again, burn for time. And there's just, yeah, there's so many unique things that you can and admittedly, if people know the cards, the deck will get a bit worse. But that's just how it goes with some of these rogue decks. And in general, the decks like this still have their worth. Like this deck can definitely, even if my opponent knows the deck, sometimes like if they don't have the response for the priestess, they can't win anyway. Because this card was getting so much advantage on its own. And especially good like something like baiting. And another Plant example is using die. They ash it. They bait because they don't know when to interrupt. They interrupt when they can. You can just bait and save, and then use your one value, like your one like very high value card, and keep it to the end, and then win off that one very high value card. That kind of thing happens a lot with rogue decks. But yeah, this is just an example of a deck that I think has loads of potential. Obviously, there's other variants, and this is a first draft list, which I will show the process for, and it could go many different ways. And there's plenty of other decks. Please feel free to recommend me some, because I'd love to have a look and just go through rogue decks. I'd love to make a little series of trying, because you go on YouTube and you find all of these deck profiles from people who've just like made the deck for fun, and then they've left it, and they get thousands of views, which is props to them. But you don't know that these decks are competitive. I'd like to try and make these decks competitive and actually put out real competitive content for a variety of rogue decks. So let me know in the comments if there's any kind of decks you'd like me to try and cover, or even any critiques for this kind of list. Because again, this is a draft. Don't know how it would go. I'll probably end up taking it to a few tournaments. I may record something from that, and then we can kind of over videos you'll see how these kind of lists can evolve if I decide to go that route. But yeah, I hope this kind of thing's informative, and yeah, I'll hope to see you in the next video.